just thought I'd spend a few minutes to talk about President Biden's coronavirus bill. Let me see if I can explain why so many of my Republican colleagues, and I'm part of that, are disappointed in the bill. This bill will be our sixth coronavirus bill. I don't think anybody, any fair-minded person, can accuse the United States Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, of not trying to respond to this devastating virus and the economic problems that it has created. And I've been very proud that in the first 5 bills, we did it on a bipartisan basis. We spent a lot of money, about $4 trillion. That's 4 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 taxpayer dollars. And of course, we don't even have 5% of that. We borrowed every bit of it. Just a staggering sum. But we did it because we had a crisis and we had to deal with it. That's what we were sent up here to do. We did it on a bipartisan basis. But the last bill, President Biden's most recent bill, what we called the $1.9 trillion bill, we haven't done on a bipartisan basis. And I'm disappointed in that. I understand politics. You do too, Mr. President. But I listened very carefully to President Biden and throughout the campaign and in his 6 weeks of his administration. And he said very clearly and repeatedly, I want to work with everybody. What I heard him say to the Republicans was, I want to meet you halfway. I don't mean any disrespect, but if that's the case, either he or the people around him are not a very good judge of distance. It's been made very clear to us that there will be no negotiations on this bill, that President Biden decided to proceed through reconciliation, which only requires a majority. And I think we both expect, Mr. President, there to be 50 Democratic votes in favor of this bill and 50 Republican votes against it, and Vice President Harris will break the tie. And that's not a bipartisan bill. And I do. I regret that. And I think it could have been different. We can debate about whether we need $1.9 trillion, and I understand there are good arguments on both sides. I've heard the arguments, and I've listened carefully to my Democratic friends explain why they think we need it. There's another side of the story, and that is that, thank the Lord, we enjoyed 4% GDP growth last quarter. Most economists reckon that we will have about 6% GDP growth this year. The American people have about $1.6 trillion in excess savings. We have all this liquidity that as soon as it is allowed to be released is going to stimulate our economy substantially, in my judgment. Everyone involved is doing a wonderful job on the vaccines. President Trump's team did a wonderful job. President Biden's team is doing a good job. The governors seem to be doing a great job. People are getting vaccinated. We know that we have a lot of people in America who had the virus and didn't even know it. We're rapidly approaching the point where either through vaccination or people who've had the virus and therefore had the antibodies, that we're going to have way over a majority of the American people protected. And so one point of view is that we don't need to spend $1.9 trillion. But there was a middle ground here, Mr. President. And I'm disappointed that the president took the position that, look, we need to spend $2 trillion right now, even though there's $1 trillion at least in previously appropriated funds that we haven't spent yet. Now, a reasonable approach would have been to say, do we really need to spend $2 trillion? Maybe we ought to spend the other $1 trillion and see if that'll do it. Another reasonable approach would have been to say, maybe we ought to reprogram some of the $1 trillion that hasn't been spent. For example, we appropriated, I think, about $70 billion to our elementary and secondary schools. They've only spent $4 billion. So why are we giving them another $160 billion in President Biden's bill? Maybe, I'm not saying it's the case, but we ought to explore it. Maybe the schools didn't need the full $70 billion we gave them if they've only spent 4 or 5. So maybe we could reprogram some of that money. Now, if we had this money sitting in a checking account, I would still think, because it represents a scarce resource, I would still think that that we would need to take a look at the money we've already spent and either spend it if it's well placed or reprogram it before we go out and spend $2 trillion. But we don't have the money in a checking account. We're going to borrow every penny of this money. $2 trillion. That's going to bring debt up to 27, 28, 29 trillion. And we know, Mr. President, that right behind it is going to come a green infrastructure bill. And I'm hearing that could be $2 to $3 trillion more. At some point, we're going to run out of digits. I mean, at some point, we're going to have to change the name of the Department of Treasury to the Department of the Debt because there's no treasurer left. It's all debt. The other thing that bothers me about the bill, Mr. President, President Biden, and again, I understand politics, he has marketed this bill as an emergency. It's an emergency. We have to do it now. Right now, we need $1.9 trillion to deal with the economic crisis caused by the lockdown. And I understand that argument. And that there clearly are some Americans who need help. But if what the president is saying is accurate, then why is so much of the money not even going to be spent until a year from now? I look at the bill and I say, if all that's true to deal with an immediate crisis, why are we giving money to states and local governments that have actually seen their revenues go up? Why? There's no crisis. And I look at the bill and I ask myself, why are we giving money to bail out pension plans? Can we talk about this? And I look at the bill and I say, why, as I just alluded to, why are we giving I think that's the figure, Mr. President, $160 billion to our elementary and secondary education institutions when we've given them $70 billion in the past and they've only spent $4 billion? Where's the fire? They've got $65 billion or so left. This is real money. There's no money fairy. And I look at the bill. I mean, I want to help the American people. Gosh, many of them do need help. But should we really be sending stimulus checks to people who've never missed a paycheck out there? Do they really need the money if they haven't been laid off? If they've been paid the entire time of the lockdown? Why are we doing this? Couldn't that money, first of all, one option is not to spend it if there's not a need and pay down our debt, or at least not increase our debt. Another option would be on spending on something that we really need. And I've come to the conclusion when I'm not trying to be mean-spirited, but that that's why I say calling this a coronavirus bill, you know, it's like calling Harvey Weinstein a feminist. This isn't a coronavirus bill, not the way it's been portrayed. Now, the American people still have needs. We still have some folks, primarily in the leisure industry and the travel industry, who need our help. They do need help. We have a lot of folks who lost their job through no fault of their own unemployment's about to run out. They need our help, and we ought to help them. But the right way to do this, Mr. President, is to sit down as a body, Democrats and Republicans, and go through our needs, not our wants, because that's another problem with this bill. It's more wanty than needy. Go through our needs, and let's discuss how much money we should appropriate to those needs in light of the fact that we've already spent $4 trillion and we have a bunch of money left over. And that's not the way this is being done. This is just being rammed down our throats. This is just raw gut politics, which I understand. I've been around it. You have too, Mr. President. We've both been around the block a few times. But that's not how you allocate scarce resources. And the final point I'll make, you know, I know when we did the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we meaning the Republicans, we went through reconciliation. We did. And so a fair-minded person might be thinking, well, Kennedy, you know, how can you criticize your Democratic colleagues for using reconciliation if you did it? And that's fair, except when we did the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we asked our Democratic friends in leadership, can we sit down and see what we can put together? And we were told no. We don't want to reduce taxes. And that's not what happened this time. You know, 10 of my colleagues, I wasn't invited, and that's okay, but 10 of my colleagues went to the White House and visited with President Biden for 2 hours. And came back and said, you know, I think he may want to put together a bill together, and we're excited, and was going, yay, that's great, wonderful. And then next thing we knew, White House issued a statement and said, our idea of unity is to do what we say and don't ask questions. And we both thought, no, that's not unity. So all this could have been avoided, Mr. President. It all could have been avoided, and I think we're going to end up spending money that doesn't need to be spent right now. I think we're going to end up spending money where we don't need to spend it. And I'm so glad that Senator Schumer withdrew his bridge project and that Speaker Pelosi withdrew her Silicon Valley subway. That's just spending porn as far as I'm concerned. But in any event, Mr. President, I wanted to get that off my chest. We're going to go through a vote-a-rama where we all offer amendments. Maybe together we can make this bill better and get rid of some of the spending porn, as I call it, and do the job that the American people sent us here to do. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I don't see Senator Sanders. I'm sorry. I yield to my good friend, Senator Peters.